All right, Quentin, welcome back on the podcast. How you doing, my friend?
Yeah, doing awesome. Really glad to see you, even virtually, and to be
I
here, man.
know, I know. I have to see you in person again.
Yeah,
For those
sure.
listening or watching, Quentin and I are longtime friends, childhood we could almost say, or teenage year friends. Uh, and I had you on a while ago. It was in French, and we decided, hey, you know what? Let's do one in English. And plus, we haven't talked in a while, so it's a double whammy. We get to talk, we get to catch up, and we get to talk about cool stuff that you love talking about. So that's pretty exciting.
That's awesome, and that you share as well. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to sharing those fascinating topics with you.
exactly, exactly. Quentin, for those who don't know you yet, can you give us a brief bio? So who are you? What do you do, my friend?
Yeah, so my main job is doing scientific research. So I'm doing scientific research. I'm affiliated to Enterprise for Society, which is in between IMD Business School, EPFL, and University of Lausanne. So I've got a PhD in economics 2 years ago, and keep doing research in that field. But mainly, my field of expertise, my passion, my obsession is statistics, and more specifically causality. So things that we are going to discuss today. So I published in, that's my main job, to publish in scientific journals. So now I'm mostly working on the environment crisis, trying to understand what's going on and how can we at least reduce this dramatic situation. And aside from this, I also spend a lot of time doing communication and teaching. So I taught to more than 10,000 students now, mostly in academia, from bachelor in economics to in vivo lab researchers. So always teaching statistics, causality, how to do research, how to do experiments, and all this, and more also trying to communicate science, because for sure, if it remains in the hands of the few researchers who will read each other's their fancy math and papers, I mean, you lose a lot of the benefit and what we can do with academia. So that's why I think it's key to connect what we do with the world. But it's tough, and but fascinating as well.
Yeah, I like it. You said PhD in economics. If you had to summarize in a couple minutes, what are the main things that you've learned while you studied for your PhD in economics?
Yeah, the two things, I guess. The world is extremely complex. So, you really have this Dunning-Kruger effect. I
Mhm.
think that's fascinating, because it's exactly
Can you
when you,
explain? Can you explain it? What the Dunning Kruger effect is for those who don't know?
yeah, sure. So basically, when you discover a new topic, after very quickly, you feel that you own the topic. You might feel that you own the topic. That's just an average. People tend to be super confident because they read few posts, few articles, maybe a book. And then basically it's really interesting. It's the same with academia. You go through bachelor, master, you're like, really, I really own this thing. And then there is a tipping point. You arrive in PhD, for me it was rather in PhD, and then everything falls down. You're like, I have no clue, actually. The world is way too complex. This is way too complicated for me to actually grasp anything. And everything I've read so far was wrong, mostly. So you enter this really steep slope.
Recession. It's a recession,
Exactly,
right?
recession. And then it takes a long time to really own and master the topic and increase your knowledge and confidence. But how I perceive it is sure, you increase your knowledge, but as well you accept uncertainty and you manage better your understanding of uncertainty. It's always the same. So at least you have an idea of what you don't know.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
but you have to have seen enough of the topic
yeah,
to know how much you're missing. It's very interesting. A couple of years ago, I started watching a few videos from a guy called Daniel Schmachtenberger. I think I sent you a couple of his, and watching a few of his video series. One thing that I came out of them, or one thing that I came out with, is simply that my confidence in different beliefs that I held was way overestimated, and that maybe I didn't have to change anything that I actually understood at that point because I needed more information, but the confidence with which I was maybe asserting certain things or I believe certain things was not justified. I had not done enough of the homework to justify the level of confidence with which I was talking about certain topics.
I see, and this is very tricky because, for example, when you became, I don't like the word, but I don't have a better one now, an expert, you really like spend 10 years studying something really hard every day. And then it's very hard because when you know the complexity of the world, mainly it's something that I witnessed in academia with all my colleagues, you become very like, not like most of the people you will encounter in the street talking. You're like, my 2 cents on this topic is just this. I'm not the expert, but actually, you know that this person saying this studied this for 5 years and published in scientific articles on this topic. They are just maybe not the top expert in the world. And the more I interacted with people outside academia, I witnessed that I could not speak like this. Like if I was always, I don't really know, but actually I read 10 books on this and studied this like crazy. And people were like, okay, stop. So let me tell you because I know. And they were telling me things that I knew were completely wrong. It was very interesting because it really taught me how to communicate and exchange with people outside academia. And it was very interesting. Not lying with your knowledge, it's just the way you present yourself and what you know and what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. So I cut you off before. You talked about the complexity of the world is one of the things you came out of your PhD with. What's the second lesson or second thing that you learned during that time?
That alone you do nothing at all. And really, I mean, that's important during a PhD and after, because you have this picture of the lonely scientist. And that's completely wrong. I mean, I just published my single authored paper, the only paper I single authored. I worked on this for 7 years. And even if it's just my name on it, I mean, I spoke about this paper to more than maybe 100, 200 people. Everybody knew this paper over the 7 years. I presented it in different universities, seminars, talked about it to top researchers on the field. And everybody gave feedback and helped me tremendously. The editors, the referees for the journal helped me tremendously to improve this work. So it's definitely not and if you try to make it like as a lonely researcher, you might fail, or at least you won't achieve the greatness you could by working together. And I think that was really beautiful. And that was really important, I guess, for me, because I always struggled, I guess, before to accept help. I just witnessed that it was a necessity, and that alone I would do nothing at all.
Plus, it enriches what you do so much. I mean, we're operating in different worlds, even though you do create some videos and some content for social media. But let's say, to simplify, you're in academia. I'm on YouTube, and I'm just composing a presentation on a given topic that I'm going to put out soon. And before I did a first draft, and I asked on Instagram, was like, hey, I'm creating that presentation. I'd love some feedback. What do you think? What's missing? And I sent it to about 20 people, and they all gave me really detailed feedback. And now my 2.0 version that I'm going to publish publicly is going to be so much better, thanks to all those people that had an input and an outside eye, because I don't know where my blind spots are, right? And that's something I'm trying to be very conscious of in everything that I do, is I only can see what I can see here, and there's a whole world that I'm missing simply because of my intrinsic biases, my lack of information on some aspects, and all those things. And getting that outside perspective is so enriching, and it brings so much more to what we do. And I love that it works the same no matter what level you're at, right?
Oh, completely. I was exactly thinking about you, and I would have said that actually. So I really see it in the same way. The way you share, you exchange. Social media has their dark sides, but definitely, I mean, I just started posting daily on LinkedIn since August, and it brought me so much, so much knowledge, exchange with professional top scholars in my field. I can really learn a ton, exchange, and it's a real network. I can drop them a message every week. They do the same. So it's incredibly powerful, social media to use the power of the mass.
Causality is your passion, your obsession, as you mentioned it before. It's even in your bio on your website. So explain to us what causality is, and then why it's so interesting to you.
So it's quite simple, the idea. the thing is, every decision you take at the individual level or firms level or politicians, they take decisions because they think that it will have an implication and change. This is, so they assume a causal chain. And if you fail to properly observe and discover the causal chain, you take wrong decisions. And for example, I mean, at the individual level, you could be thinking, okay, hey, if I become vegan, I'll have a positive impact on the environment. Well, that's not sure at all. You really have to understand what it will change and what it will cause, what will be the consequences and that stuff. Maybe you think if I drink this additional shot of vodka, I'll dance better. And you always take decision like this. I mean, YouTube will be, if we keep spamming individuals with our YouTube ads, with YouTube Premium ads, it will increase the subscription. How do they come up with this decision? They should have an idea of what's the causal effects behind. If you want to adapt, change your training, you should think, okay, this will give me more strength, more endurance. All those things are based on causal effect or things that you hope that will create cause and effect. And actually, the beauty about this is it's very simple to say, but actually to prove it's incredibly complex. And this is due to the fundamental problem of causal inference, which is the perfect word to explain this, and which is the right way to frame it. So what is the fundamental problem of causal inference? It's basically, I'll take my usual story. Or let's say you have a headache and you're not sure if you should take a pill or not. So you wait a bit, you take the pill, you get better. And if you're like me, after a while, you really start wondering, was it really the pill? Was it something else? Was it because time went by, because I drink plenty of water or fluids or tea? And the thing is, you actually don't know. And most importantly, you will never know here in this situation. What you miss is what we call a counterfactual. It's the parallel worlds. It's a parallel world with your same self doing exactly the same thing from the Big Bang to your headache. But in one of the two worlds, you take the pill, in the other, you take the placebo or nothing. And only in this situation, if there is a difference, it will be most certainly caused by the pill. The thing is, we don't have parallel worlds. Hence, the fundamental problem of causal inference. You never observe properly the perfect counterfactual, your same self following another training, another thing. So what you try to do is actually you try to replicate this, to go as close as possible to this situation. But it's just incredibly tough. And yeah, go ahead.
No, go. I was listening.
Okay. So the thing is, then you try to, for example, set up experiments. Lab experiments is usually how you try to answer those things. So you take people, you randomly allocate them into groups and give them the placebo, give them the pill. And the fact that they are randomly allocated arguably make it causal because they have nothing, they are really comparable, the two groups, and they have nothing to say about if they take the pill or the placebo. So it's not endogenous, it's not based on their own decision. And as they are randomly allocated, they should be very similar, the two groups. So then you can potentially replicate something close to the parallel worlds. But it's never that easy. We will talk about this. But I think one last example, maybe on the macro level, something that I've read and seen even by experts in the environment, arguably expert. And you see people who show that, well, we said that renewable energies will save us and reduce emissions. Look at emissions through time. They keep increasing at the same pace, potentially even faster than ever. And then you look, well, there is increase as well in renewable energies. So it must be that renewable energies are useless because they increase, but we see energy keep still increasing. Well, we don't know. Maybe the world without renewable energy will have even faster pace of increase. We don't know, and we will never perfectly know. But we try to infer what will be the world without renewable energy, and that's the beauty of this field and the necessity to understand this.
Yeah, so that's great, and I think we can run parallel stories on your end with the environment, what you're studying right now, and then on my side with the training, because again, causality, did that training program increase your, you know, your 5-minute power by 20 watts? We can, and then, so what do I have to, when I'm asking myself that question, right? I'm gonna have a test, and then I'm gonna run a program with an athlete, and I'm gonna test them on the other side. And then I'm gonna see, hopefully, a positive delta between the initial test and the second test. So what do I need to control? What do I need to think about in my assessment to determine if the training program had the effect that I wanted, or if there are other factors that I need to consider?
Very good. So the first thing is, you will never know for sure. You have one observation, lots of uncertainty, many things changing at the same time. Maybe it's the training, maybe it's just the fact that they are just pumped because they are working with you. And we'll never know. But the thing is, you can still, with anecdotal evidence, with really things that you observe on a daily basis, you can try to get an idea. And for example, what do I say? You have what we call the Bradford-Hill criteria. You can look it up or write it for the audience. It's a series of criteria that helps you to get an idea if it might be causal or not, when you don't necessarily have a proper randomized control trial or something. So basically, you look if there is a time association, if basically the consequence happens after the cause, but in a reasonable, with a reasonable delay at the speed you would expect it to happen. Mm-hmm. You can check for many things similar to that. Is there something else happening at the same time? This is, for example, if you something in your field that always that is hard to maybe measure, and similar to what you're asking, is somebody who go for meat diet. How do you say that?
All meat diet, or
yeah,
I guess you could say carnivore. All meat diet.
On a carnivore diet.
Yeah.
And we claim, well, it's the carnivore diet that helps me. So eating more meat is helping me reduce inflammation in many things. It might be the case, but many things changes at the same time. Is it eating more meat, or is it because you stop eating gluten or other things that were causing different issues? So it's hard to know here if it's eating more meat or cutting on the others, because many things happen at the same time. Is it the total intake of your calories at the end of the day? Is it a protein intake? Because many things are changing. Mm-hmm. And here, typically, it's very hard, because usually what you want to do to assess a causal effect, you want to keep everything else fixed, but change one thing. And it's hard with sport, because you will change, I guess, many things: the pace, the rhythm, the number of training, the person you're working with, the environment. You have the seasonality changing. Maybe it's just because it's summer, before it was winter, you were tired. So many things are happening at the same time. Maybe your athletes have children, they are not sleeping, but they started their protocol with you, and
yes.
the child is not sick anymore, so they start sleeping and they are really pumped. So it's just very hard. But I mean, the thing is, if you have an understanding of causality and what can go wrong, it helps. It helps to see if there is another story.
But I guess that's the important thing, is always ask yourself the question, right? Always question your own assumptions, and I guess that comes back to the scientific process itself, right? The last man standing idea. It's, you have to keep chopping away at your own theory or hypothesis until is left only what is still standing after all the insults and attacks that you produce against it. And only that, and every step of the way that this thing is still standing in the middle there, or whatever's left of it, because you've chopped off left and right, because some stuff, you know, you thought it made sense at the beginning, now it doesn't anymore in light of new evidence. And then as you go down that path, I guess you strengthen your hypothesis, and you can become more and more certain that or your level of confidence can increase progressively, but you will never reach 100%, right?
Exactly. So that's a perfectly well summarized of the scientific process, and now you try to find evidence for causality. So indeed, something you can do, you suggested, and I guess that's what you're doing, is basically you change several things, and maybe later you can just keep doing with your protocol and change other things, and you see if it's still increasing. Okay, so it was not this story, it was not that. And that's exactly what you explained. And that's the beautiful part. And that makes it almost an art to study causality, because actually there is no statistical test. You can just run a statistical test, get a p-value, and you have a certain confidence that what you find is causal. It doesn't exist. How you have things getting close to this, you can do things in that direction, but that's exactly as you said. For me, I really perceive when I try to reveal a causal effect, like what is the effect of lockdowns on the spread of the COVID-19? Basically, you try to reveal this effect, and you have potential alternative stories. So you try to find the culprit of a crime. Is it lockdowns which reduced the spread of the virus, or is it something else? And then what could it be? And you check for other things, and you discard those other potential suspects until, as you said, you just have one person standing. Okay, it's you. I got you. But it's like with, I guess, for police detective, it's like it's very rare that you have a video very clean of filming somebody doing the crime. Most of the time, it's you have piece of evidence that adds up, and in the end, you don't have other potential culprits. And that's exactly the same with causality. So basically, when you present a paper, a scientific article, mainly in economics, because economists are known to be completely obsessed with causality for very good reasons. And it's really a field, and the journals in economics are the toughest about this criteria to publish. When you present in a seminar in economics, everybody is doing this. Basically, you start presenting, and everybody will come with alternative story, and try to destroy your story. It's like the Olympic Games. It's like the national sport of economics. Yeah. Actually, you present your cool idea, and everybody's, it's not this. It might be that. I've read this, and you have to discard all those stories. And that's why usually in economics, you can take 5 years to publish a paper, which has sometimes 100 pages, because basically you have 60 pages of all the stories of clever people who came up, where you have to say, it's not this. And it takes a while.
But if we want to be intellectually honest, that's the only right way of doing it.
Yes, and it's still clearly not perfect, but it's the best we have.
Now, talk about the reverse situation where maybe for whatever reason, now I'm done being open to outside information, and I just want to prove that my idea is correct. So what would someone do in that situation?
So if I understood well the question, so the thing is, humans are doing scientific research, and to survive in academia, you have to publish. You have a saying which is called publish or perish, meaning basically you have to publish at a faster and faster pace always. It's a race. And the thing is, if you don't find an effect, if you don't find interesting stuff, that might be the end of your career. And this is very problematic. This is really a deep, serious problem we have in academia, because this is dangerous. It gives the wrong incentive to people to try to publish. And I mean, when you do scientific research, you have, mainly in social sciences, you have 100,000 degrees of freedom of how you can put things together. I mean, now I'm studying, I have a paper behind me that I was working before. I have like a data set with thousands of variables. I have hundreds of ways of coding them, of putting them together, of picking the control variable, the functional form, will it be linear, quadratic, polynomial? And it's basically, if you're not really honest, you can torture the data until they say whatever you want. That's also something that's quite known. So the scientific process tries to prevent this by how it's set up. Basically, you send your article to a journal. You have other people in this field that try to kill your story and try to see if you manipulated things, like try to change this, use this data set instead, add this variable, get rid of this one. And you see if the things are robust, if they move all over the place and you're gone, or if it's really robust to all those changes. And that's the safeguard we have so far. Again, it's not perfect, but it helps. It helps.
But in order to do that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you also need to share the data that you base your interpretation on. Is that always the is that common practice to just share the data or not?
Yeah, so you raised a very important points. Really, you're really on point. So that's really on my line of thought as well. So there is a replication crisis in science, and I can share again. You can put the reference of a science article who showed like the massive percentage of people thinking researcher assessing this problem. What does it say? Basically, to prevent the other way, to prevent also that you manipulated everything, is that everybody should be able to replicate your results. So understand everything, redo the experiment, get the same results. And in this paper, I don't have the numbers here, but even a significant percentage of the researcher that they interviewed said that they were not even able to replicate their own results. That was completely crazy, you know? And so this is a big issue. So about your question, everybody should make their data and code available. So now I have 4 published papers in different journals. And I'm not sure, I think for all of them, I have the data out there in the code, but it's not necessarily the case. You don't necessarily have to. And I completely understand why many people are not doing it. Because you can publish, you get citations, but if you share your code and your data, you have a way higher probability that somebody realizes that you mess up. But you don't get like you don't get really a benefit by sharing the data on your career. The only thing that can well, you're honest, so this is a good thing, but that's for yourself, right? You don't get like more citations because you do it. On the contrary. So the thing is, you don't really have those incentives. And again, that's really a big problem because it's just risky in the end. You don't get benefits. So if you put it out there, maybe somebody will replicate and be like, okay, you just mess up at this 534th line of code. And then you're in a bad situation. That should be, we should be obliged to do it.
Yeah, like what I was thinking of, especially for somebody as passionate as you are, if it's not good for your career, it's good for what you're doing, in the sense that if somebody can try and replicate what you did and make sure that it actually, you know, adds up and the output is the same, then, you know, for what I want to, it's probably not the right saying in statistics, but for the love of the game, you have to put your data out there and your code out there. And because then I guess that would be the equivalence of transparency and showing that, hey, I have nothing to hide. This is what I found. But like you said, there's the personal incentives, professional incentives of publishing, as you mentioned them. And then because I guess the scientific or the field of research is a vast field. And it's not void of outside incentives as well to maybe have some input that we don't want people to see.
Yes, so that leads to indeed to many issues, but that's true. In the end, you're right. I just love what I'm doing. So typically, I will try to keep pushing for this. It's even why I'm moving from my usual way of coding for statistics, which was a program called Stata, which is very expensive. So you have to be in academia, and academia has to pay for it. And now I'm moving to Python because I want people to be able everywhere in the world to understand what I'm doing, to try as well, to replicate, to challenge what I did. And that's for sure putting me not in the most comfortable place, but that's not what I aim for. I mean, you said it. I mean, I think when you love something, you're just obsessed with this. My aim is not to have my name on papers. It's really to contribute, hopefully, the big picture and to big debates and try to at least participate to answering those very tough questions we face today.
You were talking about randomized controlled trials. So can we talk about what are the upsides of such experiments? Because they're, from what I understand, or at least from what I've heard in recent times, they seem to be the gold standard of, you know, scientific research when we're trying to compare and see if something has the effect that we're looking for or not. So what are let's steelman RCTs first. What are they good at? But then let's talk about their costs and their maybe their shortcomings.
just take the computer next to me to give you the right reference live. But so what is a randomized control trial very quickly? It's basically what I explained in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's a lab experiments. You take a group of people. So it has many different forms, but the simplest way to frame it, you have a group of individuals, could be animals, could be whatever, cells, and you randomly give a treatment, let's say a pill, and a placebo to a second group. And hopefully everybody is blinded. It means that the experimenter, as well as the participant, has no clue if they took the placebo of the treatment to avoid placebo effect, basically, from both sides. And that's the initial idea. And this will help you to get very close to the parallel world. So basically, in vivo research, so research with animals, in medical research, they are very good at getting very close to the parallel world story. The closest you can do is basically you take the same animal, same individual, and you have within pair comparison, it's called. It's basically you do a surgery or you do a treatment or you apply something on different limbs of the same individual.
Okay.
So it's very close. It's the same person and you just compare the difference on different limbs. But obviously there are very few cases where you can do this. You must have different parts of the body that are identical or very similar. And the treatment should not have like a systemic effect. So if it's scream or things like this, it usually doesn't work. So many things where it's not possible, but that's very close to the parallel world story. Still, your left arm and right arm are not exactly the same, but you can still randomize, and it's very close. The thing is, when I teach to in vivo lab researchers, the vast majority are using inbred strains of rats or mice. So basically, it's mice or rats that have been like that are almost identical genetically. On generation and generation, they reproduce. They are almost identical, not clones, but it's very close to that. And the thing is, you can perfectly set up your experiments. The two groups are almost identical. They're almost clones. But then you lose a lot the capacity to extrapolate, because within your study, you have what we call the internal validity. Within your study, it's very close to the parallel world, but there are very few differences between those animals. So then maybe you take just another strain of rats, and the results are different. And try to extrapolate to humans. It's even further.
To make a parallel to the training world, it's like testing a protocol on somebody who's sedentary and out of shape and maybe has metabolic disease, and then getting your result and trying to apply it to another demographic, somebody who's active, in good shape, or even to go to the other extreme to take a professional athlete. And that's something that someone whose work I follow closely, his name is Inigo San Milan. He's a researcher, he's a cancer researcher, and he's also a coach for some of the best riders in the Tour de France with a professional cycling team. And he published a paper a little while ago that compared different physiological responses to exercise in three different groups. He had a metabolic syndrome group, he had a moderately active group, and he had a professional cyclist group. And it was fascinating to see how different those three populations were on the same metrics that he was looking at. So what you're saying here is essentially, from the rat standpoint, if you only have one strain, your result is valid on that strain and might not be on the other strains. And for us in the training world, your N of 1 or your N of 10 or your N of 100 with a given population doesn't necessarily transfer to another population.
Exactly. So basically what happens is the more similar the individual, the fewer you need to test your hypothesis, because you have less variability, less noise. So it's easier for your statistical model to spot the difference.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it comes at a cost, external validity, exactly as you said. So you want a bit of variability to be able to say, okay, it's applied to this different population. I mean, in medical research, it's crazy. Historically, at some point when I was teaching, somebody told me, but you should really emphasize for the students that they should do the research as well on female. And I was really, could you please repeat? like I don't understand. It took me maybe 10 minutes for me to understand that indeed, historically in this field, they mostly do research on male and try to extrapolate to the whole population. It makes no sense. And actually, that's exactly what happened. There are plenty of issues. They did this historically because basically female have menstrual cycles, so it creates more variability. But sure, you have more variability, you need more individuals, but you must study the effects it has on this population. The other reason was arguably that they wanted to preserve future mother and their babies by doing less research on them. Fair point. But still, the thing is, you had many issues. At the end of the 90s, like I'm not sure now, but I think 7 out of 10 drugs withdrawn from the market in the US have been withdrawn because of side effects observed only for female or mostly for female. Wow. Of course, they never tested that before. So that's no surprise. I mean, you have plenty of things. So I can show you, there is this fascinating article from BMJ, so British Medical Journal, which is a very famous journal, which is called the following: parachutes used to prevent death and major trauma when jumping from an aircraft. This is a randomized control trial. It's not a hoax, it's not a joke, it's you'll see. Basically, it's a true article published, and the objective was to determine if using a parachute prevents death or major traumatic injury when jumping from an aircraft. It's a RCT, randomized control trial. It was during 1 year between September 2017 and 18. 92 aircraft passengers aged 18 and over were screened for participation. Only 23 agreed to be enrolled and were randomized. What's the intervention? They jumped from an aircraft with a parachute versus an empty backpack. Main outcome measure was the composite of death or major traumatic injury upon impact with the ground measured immediately after landing. They find no effects, no difference between the two groups, so jumping with a parachute and no backpack. So where's the catch? The catch is pretty funny. However, the trial was only able to enroll participants on small stationary aircraft on the ground. And this is exactly the point about randomized control trial and extrapolation. You control perfectly the environment, but then maybe it's not a good representation of reality. You have plenty of examples like this. And exactly as you said, like if you use someone who's not doing sports, it's a different effect, and that's very important. So then you have other options that's than randomized control trial. Basically, that's mostly my expertise is I'm planning now, I'm teaching randomized control trial. I'm planning to run a few in the coming years and setting up now some, but mainly I'm doing what we call natural experiments. It's basically randomized control trial, as we have seen, are limited in some way, have some limitations. And also in some situation, it's not possible to run an RCT. I mean, one of my papers is about what's the effect of sending weapons on the probability of war in Africa. You're not going to randomly send weapons in Africa to check the effect, right? So sometimes it's impossible, unethical. For example, for gender studies, you cannot switch your gender for a study like this to see the effect. So on a CV, so in a control environment like a CV, you can just switch a line where it's written something, your name or male, female, if it's written on the CV, but I doubt. But for many things, it's not possible to switch. So then you must use what we call natural experiments. It's basically when something in nature, in reality, will replicate the conditions or the setup you will set up in a lab. It will replicate something similar. So let me give you an example. If you want to study the effect of pollution on lung disease, you can do this in a lab with experiments with animals, but let's say you really want to see the real effect on humans living their daily life. You're not going to run this in a lab exposed to really high toxic pollution to some individual control treatment group. So what you do, you can compare, I don't know, polluted place with another one. If you do this, back to the parallel world story, there are many differences, right? If you compare somebody who lives in a city with someone who lives in a farm, they maybe have different activities, health habits, the way they move, what they eat. So many things will explain the difference issue with health. So then you look for a natural experiment. For example, when you had the Olympic Games in China, they they prevent or to reduce air pollution, which was very, very bad, and help with the athletes and everybody coming. They just stop or reduced drastically the use of cars and closed some coal plants and different things in the area. Mm-hmm. So suddenly you have a shock. You have the same people living in the city. And just because there is a sport competition around, they suddenly are less exposed to pollution. It's not related to their decision. This is basically, from their point of view, kind of random. At some point, pollution level decrease, and then back up again. And then you can observe. This is a natural experiment. Then you can observe here with those people what happened with their health, the risk of death for children, for babies, old people, and that's actually a real paper.
Okay, very interesting. So what came to mind when you were talking about this is observational data. Is that what this technically is?
It's observational data, yeah. But then you have really precise way of capturing a shock, and you have what we call identifying assumptions, or identifying for the causal effect assumptions, and you try to see if those assumptions are met. But again, you cannot test this statistically directly. You have to check if it's plausible or not. and you can do many things. Yeah.
To me, it sounds from my previous standpoint before this conversation, it made sense. Well, from what I understand, observational data is ranked below something that you might see in a randomized controlled trial in terms of its intrinsic validity. It's like, oh yeah, but that's just observational data. You know what I mean? But from what you described in that specific situation, it sounds like maybe the observational data is actually, superior to the other kind of data that was collected.
I think they are really complementary. They are, and that's beautiful. And some people will hate it. It's basically you never have the perfect setup. All have pros and cons. We have seen basic. Go ahead.
That's why you need, I guess where we're going here is that we need a collection of different types of analyses, different situations. You need the randomized controlled trial, you need the observational data, and a combination of all of those perspectives brings you to the best answer possible.
Yes, completely right. And just to be very clear on this, to be sure that it's not misinterpreted. When we say observational data, it's because you have really a natural experiments with observational data. So you have a very precise setup. Those are really precise terms and things that you can put together to observe this. It's called like difference in difference, regression discontinuity design, synthetic control method. It's really precise things that you can do in that. Because else in medical research, for example, you have tons of correlational observation with observational data that leads to really sad interpretation. And that really highlights. So the other day, a very good example why causality is so important. So you have this paper published showing that the relation, the positive association, so correlation, it's not causal. It's even in the title of the article. Positive association between naps and cardiovascular disease. People taking more naps tend to have more cardiovascular disease. Okay, yeah, well, you're unhealthy, you're personally suffering, you take a nap because you feel bad. But then the thing is, you have people failing understanding, and you have a journal here in the region, in Switzerland, taking this and doing videos and articles. You should stop taking a nap. It's dangerous, all that. And you're like, what the hell? It's exactly why causality is so important, because if it's not, you don't understand this, you take the wrong decision. It might be even worse that you try to do something good, but actually it might be even worse. Mm-hmm. And I see this daily. I see this daily.
So how can we better read those informations for ourselves? How can we, and I believe you did a talk right on that. You did a TED talk on that very topic, is how can we use, I'll let you talk about it, but yeah, how can we do better? What should we do in order to not be fooled, quote unquote, by those faulty interpretations, and how can we be better equipped to interpret what we see?
So indeed, that's really what I do online. So yesterday I was giving a talk about communication, and I took my example to start. What am I doing online? Well, exactly this. I'm doing tools and tips to understand causal inference and causality to fight misinformation. And that's really what, because I deeply feel, I witness every day how important this is and how many people fail to understand this. And usually I tell the story and people are like, oh, I know this, that's kind of obvious. You're like, no, in the sense, I mean, most of the time you will fail to think about this. Just now that we're speaking, you see that it's obvious. So usually what I do, you're right. I mean, the good summary and some place to start if people are interested, it's really in my TED talk, I have a summary of the main tools, 3 main tools that I give, which are in the form of questions you can always ask yourself and ask others. And this is very powerful because that's exactly what a scientific researcher will do. Those questions are quite simple, but the more and more you practice, it's what I use daily. If I read a scientific article, if I'm in a seminar with top researchers, I will use those simple tools. Mm-hmm. So it's basically questions. For example, you can ask, is there something else explaining the results? It's like if you see that, again, I maybe have 2 obvious examples here, but to start, it's always good. If you see that people drowning in summer have sunscreen, of course, it's not a causal relationship. It's not because you pull the sunscreen that you're drowning. It's because there is something else explaining this. Mm. And those tools are useful when you listen to the news, to the media, to politicians, when you read numbers, when you listen to experts. You can really use those tools to question everything you listen to. So the other question is, could it be the reverse? So very often you have the 2 things going in both directions. It was exactly the case with the COVID pandemic at the beginning of the lockdowns. People took statistics and showed, well, the people in the countries in lockdowns are the countries with the highest mortality rate. Yeah, well, that's exactly the point. Basically, you have the fire, you call the firefighters. And that was driven mostly by reverse causality. But here, the question is very hard. You worked on this 3 years before our paper was published to properly assess this effect, because this is true. Both are true at the same time. And when it's the case, it's very hard to disentangle this. The same thing with my paper on weapons and wars. Why it was so hard and never observed the causal effect of sending weapons on the probability of war before this paper, it's because of the 2 relationships are true at the same time. When there is a conflict, the demand for arms increases. So you have more arms because there is a conflict. So now it's very hard to disentangle the 2, and it allows people to say, okay, that's not us. That's not our fault. It's just there is a conflict, we give weapons. If you don't send weapons, maybe they'll kill each other with machetes. And you need the causal evidence to settle this down. But as you said, you need like years of research and usually many research rather than just one scientific article. And so again, yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's really learning those things as I share on social media. I mean, every week I share example like is it causal? The weekly challenge where I share statistics and we try to debate and think, is it causal? Why is it not the case? And that's with daily example that I see. And I think that's typically the thing that could help.
Right. So it's essentially working that muscle, quote unquote, and trying to just confront ourselves with those questions frequently and come at it with a very, I guess, neutral perspective from the get-go. Try to not bring all our background, all our past, all our current interests and incentives into our questioning, and remain intellectually honest in the process.
Yeah, at least try. And you're right, being aware that we are all biased is a very good start. I mean, we are all. And the one who thinks they are not, they are most certainly the most biased. So we must assess that we most certainly are, but that's why scientific research is so useful. You know, I've seen this debate about actually coaches on Instagram the other day. Like someone was saying like, well, there is this debate between evidence-based and just observing what you observe every day. So I guess you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I sure do.
And the thing is exactly why you need proper scientific research is to cut all the bias you have. Because when you observe something, you have as many reality as humans observing a situation. Even in the same situation, I could speak with my brother about something that happens when we were young. Even thinking about objective facts, we just have different realities. Mine is not the truth, he's not, he's either. We both experience things differently. So then, of course, if you're a trainer, I can guess, and you want results, you can attribute a lot of things to what you're doing, the choice people are doing. There is also randomness and things that are counterintuitive. So that's very hard. That's why you need like really the scientific process to try to tune all this down, but it's still somewhere a bit tinted by this.
So you talked about the thing that you're working on right now, the environment. So what are the main questions that you're currently trying to answer through your research on that topic? And is there any preliminary conclusions or things that come out that maybe are interesting and that you could mention? I don't know how much you can talk about this, but that might be interesting for the public to be aware of. Maybe not, assertions, but just ideas that we need to keep in mind when we look at the news, when we read articles, and when we think about the situation that we're currently in.
Yeah, I think my current research agenda might be, I mean, in my fields, people will not be surprised, maybe a general audience a bit more. So the thing is, there is really this debate now. We're trying to shift our energy is a massive producer of GHG, greenhouse gas, and all those things. So it's problematic. So we try to solve this, mostly a bit of reduction now because we don't have much reserve and we have problems with supply of energy. So we try to reduce. But the main angle that politicians, firms will use is we want to substitute fossil fuels for renewable energy. If you do this, you have exactly the same problem, or a problem with of the very similar magnitude. Basically, with lithium-ion batteries, with all those electricity you need to move around for electrical vehicles, for solar photovoltaic cells, you need a ton of rare earth or materials, raw materials, that you have to dig deep down in the ground. And this is very costly in energy, in water, and in space, the space it takes. And most of those resources are in countries that have unstable regime. So it's a very big problem. And basically, if you just want to go business as usual, shift everything to renewable energy, you have the same problem or very similar. And many people, I was teaching this to my students in economics the other day, and some really could feel, they feel like discouraged. They were looking at me, but I thought this was our way out. What the hell? And actually, I'm really optimistic. The way I see it, and from what I know in research in the environment, is that the things that make the biggest difference is our behavior, like really how individuals behave. And everybody's like, that's one drop in the ocean. Well, exactly. The ocean is made of a drop of water. Because if everybody does those small shifts, it's completely crazy, the magnitude. So always when we do prediction, we can be, for example, I had this paper on fertilizers because we had problem with supply mostly 1 year ago. There was really threats to the food security worldwide. And we can use technology, and I don't have the magnitude here. It was helping to use more efficiently with artificial intelligence, very many technical things to reduce the use of fertilizer. But what's making the biggest change was like, stop eating meat. I know many people will be unhappy about this, but stopping eating meat, or at least maybe once a month, because the magnitude of things you need to feed the beef to then end up with the protein intake and calories intake is just massive. So in the end, it was also what consumed a lot of those fertilizer in the end, at the end of the chain. This makes a huge difference. And then I think how I see it is really the following, how I see the big picture. We started living beyond the planetary boundaries. Fossil fuel allowed this. We observed that maybe some people found it fantastic. We reach out insane amounts of wealth for a very few. And then we're like, okay, we don't want to move. Let's keep business as usual and use something else. No, it doesn't work. We live outside beyond the planetary limits, and we have to stop this. We have to to get back to something more simple. I mean, it was well summarized by one of our students in our master in sustainable management technology during our annual event the other day. She was like, think now, and you should think now, what was the last time you were really happy, like truly happy? And then I thought directly at my daughters, my wife. She was like, most of the people will think about people and time they share together, not about the brand new car or things. Sure, you need a minimal wealth level to be safe, and this is important, and this is achieved just by a minority of the population. So we need this, but not insane amount of wealth. And this is the problem, because there is something that's really a lie that we tell everybody. We need to reduce our consumption and our emissions. That's a lie. It's not we need, it's the 10% or the 20%, the richer on this planet. The other 80% are not using more than one planet. They are not going beyond the planetary boundaries. It's just the 10%, the 20%, the richest that should reduce this. And it's, I guess, totally feasible. So that's why actually I'm quite optimistic. It's like I dream of a Homo sapiens that will evolve, more grateful, more mindful. And yeah, that's a bit ambitious and utopic, but I like to have this in mind.
It doesn't surprise me much given that I know you a little bit. And it's exactly what Quentin would say. But it's interesting because it sounds like no matter what the situation is, it's always back to ourselves and what we do, right? If you want to lose weight, there's no magic pill, there's no magic exercise program. You have to change your behavior and day in and day out do the things that you need to do. You want to be healthier, you need to look at what you put inside your mouth, you need to look how you sleep, you need to look at how much sunlight you get during the day. And then, like you said, if we want to go beyond that and look globally, well, every single person contributes to this global effect. And as you pointed out rightly, so it's all the people that are debating those questions, the people that have enough time and safety and security and comfort to think about those ideas. Those are the people that actually need to do most of the changing. And by those people, I mean us, versus pointing the finger or saying, you know, something has to change somewhere. But I like your conclusion. I think it's a good one.
No, but I thought it's really in line, because I extrapolated to this with my student. I was like, you know, health is kind of the same thing, right? If you think about, you want technology to save you, it might be costly and it might not work. The same for health. I mean, do sports, sleep well, eat well. It will reduce most of your health risk that you have. And that's interesting, because many things, but it makes sense. The rationale behind is just you don't want to put the effort daily, but that is what works as usual. It's like what's most costly is usually what will be the most efficient. You just need to get on with it and do it every day. It's the same with the environment. Like it's everybody, it's not a magic pill, it's not a medical doctor that will come up, I have the technology that will save us. I doubt this. And not so many people think that it's the case.
Quentin, my good old friend, where can people find you online? You talked about LinkedIn. We'll put your LinkedIn profile in the description so people can reach out if they want to continue those great conversations about causality and all things statistics. Where else can we find you online, my friend?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the main platform where I'll post daily. So you'll find every activity I have. There will be something on LinkedIn to inform you. And then I have Instagram and even TikTok, but I honestly don't use them so much, because as soon as I have too much work, I just stop on those and focus on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn will always be there. And there is my link tree that I can share as well with all my key resources, TEDx and things like this.
Fantastic. Well, my friend, it was an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show, and I'm glad we did this one in English. It was a good change. By the way, your English has gotten significantly better since we last spoke in English. I mean, it was good already, but I can tell you're practicing a lot.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you, my friend.
So
that was really great. You rock. Fantastic job you're doing. I mean, I was talking about communication yesterday to a class of master students, and I pick your example as always. Like, you know, you want to make an impact. That guy was nobody in Switzerland. He was not even in Switzerland 2.5 years ago. And now he's like running to seminars invited by universities. Every coach I know talk to me about him. It's crazy. So if you want to make a change, like you're a good example, Sean. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Quentin. Talk to you soon, my friend.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, please take a few moments to leave a written review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch this episode again, you can find the full video recording on my YouTube channel. You'll also find hundreds of hours of free content, all my podcasts, my thoughts of the day, structured presentations, and more. So don't wait, go subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.